Hello, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be with all our Poultry School audience. Again, it's a big pleasure to have you all here. And today we will have a very interesting webinar with Mr. Ton Kramer, that he is a business manager for Zinpro. And like always, this webinar is going to be recorded and then it's going to be accessible in our platforms in YouTube. So thank you, Tom, for your time. And he will be talking about unlocking poultry potential through better water management. I think that water subject is very, very important right now in our production. So, Tom, thank you very much for your time and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Rodolfo. It's a pleasure to be here with you and the audience discussing about this important topic. And we're going to talk about unlocking poultry potential through better water management. And I hope this be useful for everybody, especially because when we produce our animals, what we expect is to have the better economic performance as much as possible. And water is something important in this aspect. But in general, when we think what we do when housing our chicks in the barn, we think about a lot of other things, and water is not a subject that we are concerned about. But I want to ask you to pay attention the importance of water in the production, because if we think about the chicken, water content represents 55 to 80% of the body weight. And as younger the animal is, the higher the content. And water is important for a lot of physiological aspects in the body. So water serves as carrier in the digestive tract, bringing the nutrients to be digested and also absorbed. So water also supports the digestive process. The water is also an important component of the blood and the lymph, and it is also important for body thermoregulation. So think about the conditions we are producing our animals. Thermoregulation is something very important. Despite these facts, we can remember our time at school, and we used to think that a good water quality was related to be colorless, to be odorless, and also insipidus. So my question for you is, do you think this is enough when we think about the water quality for our poultry? So I believe it is not enough. So we are also thinking in other situations, other factors like chlorination, like microbiological contamination, hardness, pH, temperature, volume and flow of the water. Sometimes we think about the biofilms. But again, is this enough? I don't think so. So let's think about water like a nutrient. When we consider the nutrition, when we formulate the feed, in general, we are concerned about energy, we are concerned about protein, the amino acid levels, vitamins, and minerals. But what about water? What I can tell you now is that the poultry production is not the production that is not paying attention as much to water. This is the reality to all livestock production. And my intention here is to bring this topic alive and think with you about how we can improve this to improve the performance of our animals. So thinking on that, we need to think about the consumption of the water. So we need to think about the volume that is consumed, but also the quality of the water. It is important to consider the volume because the consumption of the feed increases proportionally with the volume of water drinking. So there is a high correlation between water intake and feed intake. And also the quality is important because the nutrients that are dissolved in the water will affect the digestibility, the interaction with other nutrients, and affect finally the performance of this chicken. So the question I do for you is, how long you did the last analysis of your water, the water quality of that you are supplying your animals? So thinking on that, Zinpro has developed the Zinpro H2O water analysis program that is a tool available for the producers, for our customers, that you can use the water analysis and add the information to this program to understand what are the factors that affect the performance of those animals. Let's see some examples. In poultry production, we can think about the feed conversion ratio, the body gain, and also in the layers, what about the quality of the eggs? The eggshell quality, the quality of the chick that came from these eggs. All of these can be affected by the water quality, the nutrients, the minerals that are dissolved in the water. So as an example, we took a sample from a farm, did the water analysis, and we fill the information in the Zinpro H2O water analysis program. And I will show you a little bit about the information, some of the information that came from the report. So in this case, we did the analysis of different mineral content, as you can see here in the left side of the screen. And what we are seeing here is the percentage of the upper limit of these minerals in the water. So in this case, the numbers you can see here is this percentage. Pay attention on these three rectangles in the screen. So what you can see here is that those three elements, chlorides, sodium, and sulfur, have an amount above 100% of the upper limit of this element in the water. This means that chlorides are 238% above the upper limit. Sodium represents 310% and sulfurs 211. So this is something that the report gives us. But what does this mean? So having this information, we can understand the effect of these elements in the physiology of the animals. In this case, we can think that chlorides, for example, can impact on the consumption of water. It affects negatively the water intake, and so will also affect the food consumption. These levels of chloride in the water will also impact the acid-base balance, resulting in neurological, gastrointestinal, and renal issues for the animal, for the group of animals that are consuming this water. So some bad effects. Also, the sodium is also affecting the performance of the animals. These high levels of sodium are normally associated with sulfur and chlorides, as we can see here in this analysis. And it also affects the water intake. And again, will affect the food consumption and consequently the performance of the animals. So these levels of sodium as the chloride also affect the acid-base balance. So will affect the cardiovascular system, can generate ascites in the poultry, is related with issues like nervous or gastrointestinal, renal, and also hepatic systems. With that, it results in toxic effects, and sometimes it will result in sudden mortality. And finally, in this example, we see a high level of sulfurs. In this case, we see 211% of the upper limit. The sulfur is usually presented as sulfates associated to chlorine and sodium. It also affects the acid-base balance, resulting in nervous problems and enteric issues. and it is also associated to an increment in mortality. But when this not happens, it can affect the absorption of other elements. What is important here? This is a water with a not so bad quality. And how can I see this? This is represented by the total dissolved solids. In this case, this water has 560 ppms of total dissolved solids. This represents 56% of the upper limit according to the recommendation from the nutritional tables available. But this data is bringing some concerns to us because this data came from studies from the 70s. And the poultry we have right now, the animals that we are raising right now, are completely different from these ages. So I want to invite you to understand a little bit more about this simple factor or this simple index that is the total dissolved solids in water. The total dissolved solids in water, also known as salinity, is a very simple physical-chemical indicator of water quality. It represents the sum of all the organic and inorganic ions, mostly represented by sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And generally, they are in the forms of carbonates, chlorides, or sulfates. But what is important here is that we can consider the water like a live organism. What does this mean? This means that the water changes according to or depending on the geological region, the depth of the well, the source of water, and also the age of the water collection that are supplying your animals. Let me show you some examples in different studies. So what we can see here, these are studies made in the north coast of a state in northeast Brazil, in which they collected water from different sources. And as you can see here, there are artesian wells and also tubular wells, different depths of water collection. But what you can see here, considering total dissolved solids, pH, nitrates, and dissolved oxygen, there are variations between farms, between the sources. But pay attention here on the difference between this water that has 30 ppms of total dissolved solids and this other one with almost 1900 ppms of TDS. Those waters are completely different and the performance will be different. But you can also say that, hey, Ton, but they are different sources. They are different wells. One is artesian, the other is tubular. And maybe despite the fact they are in the same state, maybe they are far from one from other. So let me show you another study. This is also another study from the northeast part of Brazil, from the state of Pernambuco. So what the researchers did was to collect water from different wells, as pointed here in the map. And I selected this square here that represents 1 square kilometer, that represents around 247 acres. So a small region, and there are 6 wells, there are 6 water sources in this area. And what you can see here in these 6 examples is that there are different parameters that were evaluated: total dissolved solids, temperature, pH, oxygen reduction potential, turbidity, and oxygen diluted. In this case, in the number 1 case, this is a well, an artesian well with 117 meters of water collection. And the lines, the different color lines, indicate the period of the year. So the rainy season is in blue and the dry season is in red. What does this mean? This means that there is difference between the source of the water, even in this 247 acres area, but also the same source of water change the behavior, change the content in different periods of the year. And again, as I mentioned, water can be considered like a live organism. So the composition, the characteristics changes during the year. So in green here, you can see that there is a difference between total dissolved solids, especially when the depth of the source is higher. So in this case, you can see that in this artesian well, the variation between total dissolved solids is higher than tubular well, very simple, in which the difference doesn't change, but other parameters change a lot. And this is because the amount of water that is drained from the rainy period, the dilution of the content of the water, the water collection. So, and this is the reason why this changes. So, as I invited you to understand a little bit more about total dissolved solids, it is easy to evaluate this parameter. It is possible to use a simple tool like this one that measures the electric difference between two electrodes in this tool. And with that, it is possible to establish the total dissolved solids in the water. So it will indicate a standard from 0 to some thousand ppms, parts per million in water. This is important because the water quality varies considering the period of the year, the source, and especially in some regions from US, in some regions from Mexico, Central America, and also in Europe or in the west coast of Latin America, we see high levels of total dissolved solids. We have some examples from Mexico in which the variation between total dissolved solids was from 400 ppms till more than 5,000 ppms. So this can affect considerably the performance of the animals. And what is related with? So some studies we are doing with different species are showing that the amount of these minerals in water will affect the absorption of nutrients like minerals, and these can affect the tissue formation. I mean, the epithelia, the skin, the mucosa. So when we think on mammals epithelia, the hoof, the claws are affected. But when we think on poultry, we can consider the skin, the liver, the gut, the intestine, the bladder, the kidney. So a lot of tissues may be affected. The formation of these tissues may be affected, and this will impact on the health and also on the performance of the animal because the integrity of the organs and the tissues, and finally the physiology of these animals will be affected. More than that, we need to also consider the effects on the physiological process, like the immune response against pathologies or microorganisms that may affect the animal. And also, we need to remember that the antioxidant system is related with the availability of minerals in the body. So the availability of these minerals may be affected by the content of minerals in the water. Let's understand a little bit more about this. As I mentioned before, the feed intake is affected by the water consumption. The same happens with the content of total dissolved solids in the water. The amount, the high level of total dissolved solids in the water may affect the feed intake due to the water intake too. But one of the most important aspects here is related with the nutrient absorption because of the interactions, especially when we think on minerals. So if the nutrient absorption is affected, it will be also affected the nutrient utilization. And another new and important aspect is related with the bacterial development in the gut, because some recent studies are showing that excess of iron in water may promote the growth of Escherichia coli and also Salmonella related with some diarrhea and some contaminations of the poultry. So returning to nutrient absorption, those that are familiar with digestion and mineral physiology will remember on these wheels here. These are famous because they are related with the antagonism between different minerals and vitamins and minerals. And I'm using the calcium as an example. So what happens with water with high levels of calcium? So the red lines here show the interaction, the negative interaction of these high levels of calcium with the absorption of other elements like phosphorus, sodium, zinc, manganese, iron, potassium, and magnesium and manganese. And also, high levels of calcium in water may affect the absorption of vitamin B5, A, B3, vitamin E, and vitamin B2. So sometimes we will claim or complain about the performance of the animals and can complain with the nutritionist and asking what is happening with the performance of my animals because they are not performing well, they are not growing as fast as I want, or even the feed conversion ratio is not good. Maybe this is related with the water content on minerals. So someone studied this. There's a nice study about mineral absorption mechanism that I suggest to those that want to learn to look for it. But what these researchers show it to us is that imagine this is the gut, this is the intestine. So those are the villi presented in the intestine, and any nutrients to be absorbed need to be in touch with this villi, be presented to the cells, the enterocytes, and be uptaken to the enterocytes, and then finally absorbed, launching the nutrients to the bloodstream. This is the absorption. Finally, in the bloodstream, the nutrients can be spread for the organs, to all the organs in the body to accomplish the target, to perform, to make the animals to grow, to walk, to breathe, to do all the physiological process that are demanding these nutrients. But the presence of different contents of minerals in the gut may result in interactions in the lumen that may affect the absorption. Let's see this example. So we have here the enterocyte, the cell from the intestine that is responsible to make the absorption. So as I mentioned before, to be absorbed, any nutrient needs to be presented to the enterocyte, then it will be uptaken to the cell, to into the enterocyte, and then it will be launched to the bloodstream. But for a mineral to be absorbed, it needs to be uptaken into the cell by metal transporters presented in the wall of the enterocyte. Imagine this like a door. So at this door, at this transporter, there are some specific transporters that will use or will allow the absorption of a specific mineral, like this transporter here that is specific for zinc. But there are a lot of other transporters that are unspecific. So they will allow the absorption of zinc or copper or manganese or iron, and they will compete for the same transporter. So that interactions that we see in here are related with these transporters because there are a small capacity or a limited capacity to allow the absorption. So in this case, if there are competition here, the transporter will not work, and then the mineral, the nutrient will not be uptaken, and finally, it will not reach the bloodstream, and finally will not be delivered to the organs and tissues to the physiological process. So considering that, it's important to understand the mineral content on water because this content will interact with other minerals, but will also interact with vitamins, with antibiotics, with enzymes, with acids, and any other nutrient or ingredient or additive is added in the feed. They may interact together and the effect will not be as good as we want. And then we will affect the absorption, and finally, the physiological process will not happen. And the consequence of that is that the performance of the animals will not be as good as we want. So, considering that, what to do then? So I want to invite you to think about actions to ensure water quality. First of all, we need to understand the physical, chemical, and also the microbiological quality of water over time, as I mentioned it before, and also its implications. So thinking on that, it's important to make assessments or analysis of the water quality 2 times per year, every 6 months at least. Then we can understand the changes that happens during this year. And having this information, then we can implement the strategies to ensure water quality. And on these strategies, we can think on alternative sources, or depending on the region, it is necessary to treat the water or rethink the supply structure, especially on those regions that have iron pipes that may be oxidized, or also in regions that there are a biofilm formation. So having this analysis, periodic analysis, or regular monitoring will allow us to understand the quality of the water that we are supplying to our animals. And then we can, analyzing the water and adding the information that we get from this analysis to the Zinpro H2O water analysis program, we can understand what are these levels affecting the performance of the animals, as I previously mentioned. So, having this quick review about the importance of the water analysis, the water quality analysis, and especially emphasizing in something that we are not paying attention on a regular basis, the mineral content and the total dissolved solids, it is possible to better understand the impacts on our animals. So, as final remarks about this quick review, sometimes we listen that the water is a forgotten nutrient, but in my opinion, water is actually a neglected nutrient because we are using water, but we are not paying attention on the quality and neither in the effects of this water in the animals. So, considering that, the final remarks makes us think that there is a lot of to study about water and to understand about water. As I mentioned, each water is a water. I mean, sources are different and periods of the year changes the water quality. So it should be understood. The physical-chemical quality of water also affects the performance and the health of the chicken. And the total dissolved solids is a simple parameter to consider. Negligence regarding the drinking water can no longer be admitted if you want to be a high performance producer, a high performance farmer producing your poultry or your livestock animals. So water should be evaluated for mineral composition every 6 months, not only the basic analysis that we usually do, thinking on microbiological aspects or just pH or hardness. Then water treatment must go beyond just chlorination, because chlorination is related just to microbiological aspect. And finally, depending on the nutritional, the composition of water, it's important to rethink the nutritional aspects related to minerals. Sometimes it is necessary to rethink the feed formulation due to high levels of any mineral content in the water. And we didn't talk about this, but as a tool, the Zinpro performance minerals also help to improve the productivity and economic performance of the animals, because these minerals are not affected by the interaction of these minerals in water. Thinking on that and taking actions to improve the quality of the water, we will improve the quality of our animals. If with that, we can improve the performance, the economical performance of our production. With that, I appreciate your attention and we'll be able to answer any question you have right now or at any time. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Don, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that was very clear, and I think that this is going to be a lot of value to all our audience. So if we don't have any live questions, I think that your information is here, your telephone and your email. So I think that anybody that would like to reach you, they can do it directly. So Tom, thank you very much, and let's keep in touch. And I hope that this brings a lot of benefit to the industry. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bye bye. Ciao.